And good afternoon. I'm Al Kresta. I hope you've heard by now that Secretary of State John Kerry said today that he has determined that the Islamic State is committing genocide against Christians and other religious minorities in Iraq and Syria. We mentioned before that the European Parliament had a similar recognition last month. And joining me right now to talk about the word genocide is Nina Shea. She's director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. She's been an advocate for human rights and religious liberty for more than 30 years. And she's the co-author of Silenced, How Apostasy and Blasphemy Codes Are Choking Religious Freedom Worldwide, and Persecuted, the Global War on Christians. You can follow her work at hudson.org and National Review online. Nina, good to have you here. Thanks.
Thank you, Al. Thanks. Great to be with you.
How big a deal is this?
It's a very big deal. We should have had a genocide designation a long time ago, and we did not because there was resistance against including the Christians on the part of some within the administration. So this is a big victory. It would have been terrible for the Christian minority if there had been a genocide designation for some of these groups but excluded the Christians, because as you know, the Christians of Iraq and Syria have been crucified, beheaded, and their communities are shattered.
Yeah.
There is not, I don't know if your listeners are aware, but there is not a single open church, a single member of the clergy, or a single intact Christian community anywhere in ISIS-controlled territory.
It is exceedingly grim. Why is the word genocide so important? What are the technical issues associated with it?
Genocide is considered the crime of crimes. It's the most heinous human rights crime, both morally and legally. And its elements are that there has to be harm, of course, substantial bodily harm or psychological harm under U.S. statutory law, and there has to be an intent to eliminate, to eradicate, to destroy the group, at least partially destroy a group. Yeah. So this became a real issue for the Christians because some were arguing, and it's unbelievable to me that anyone could make this stance, but they were arguing that Christians are respected as people of the book by Muslims, and since ISIS is a Muslim group, they were respected as people of the book. I mean, it's preposterous.
It is. It's ludicrous.
We have seen the videos in Technicolor, in real time, about the beheadings,
yes.
You know, the cops and others. So it's a very important designation.
The Wall Street Journal says it's a potent but mainly symbolic recognition by the U.S. The Associated Press says that Kerry's finding does not obligate the United States to take additional action against ISIS militants. Why the downplaying the significance of it in these organs of opinion?
Well, I think that they're only looking at it from a strictly legal point of view, and there is a great deal of moral pressure that builds with the designation of genocide to do something for the victims. Now, it doesn't have to require a military response, but there are many other things that could be done to help. For one thing, there are peace talks going on right now in Syria, and there's no Christian voice at the table. These are talks that are going to be deciding the future of the borders of the country and who gets to control it and drafting constitutions. So the Christians need to be part of that, or they will be marginalized and shut out of what takes Syria's place. So that's one example. The other example is that these Christians have been shut out effectively of U.S. Refugee resettlement programs. The Syria Christians, no more than 60 have come to the United States in the last 5 years of conflict in Syria. It's outrageous. And that's because the UN doesn't refer them to the U.S. because they're not in the UN camps. And the reason why the Christians aren't in the UN camps is because they're too dangerous for them. So they are left in tents, living on charity and church handouts because they can't avail themselves of the UN system or come to the United States or the West. So that has to, this genocide designation is important because it then becomes a platform for policy.
Yes.
And it's not going to happen on its own, Al. We're going to have to really keep our coalition that got the genocide designation through. We're going to keep that coalition together and keep pressing.
Now, what's the next step in this? In order to trigger real hard policy activity, what do we do next?
Well, I think that we are going to, I've been working with the Knights of Columbus and, some of these other groups, Glenn Beck show, he's been very active on this too, and Mark Burnett, the Hollywood producer. I mean, there's a whole coalition of us that have been working together, and we need to stick together and press on some of these points. And I've actually been talking to the State Department even today, and they're in agreement that there has to be a policy a roadmap drafted, and that this has to be. There's an urgency to this, Al, because we're going to get a new president, a new administration, and there's going to be a very much of a lame duck administration starting really the summer. So nothing may happen in the United States for a year if we don't get it done now.
Get it done right now. So do you say the State Department then recognizes that this isn't the end of something; it's the beginning of something?
That's right. That's right. And we are militarily involved in these places. I'm not sure that there is a military answer for the Christians, frankly. I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult for those Iraqis to go back to Nineveh. There's 1 million people sympathetic to ISIS, or at least some of them are, a good fraction of them are, in Mosul. And they're going to be flushed out by any kind of a U.S. offensive and into Nineveh, where these empty Christian towns and homes are, and they're going to occupy them. So is anyone going to settle these land disputes and property disputes? We're going to have to be engaged in that. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be just a military solution there. It's going to have to involve some police work and some legal action.
I was going to say, how does that? I mean, how do you envision something like that happen? Do tribunals get set up? Are they under the United Nations, the International Criminal Court? Is it a coalition of Western nations? You know what I'm saying? Where's the center of gravity on this?
I think the center of the gravity is the United States, and I think that it has to be, and that's why this is so significant. No other voice is going to matter if the United States is not on board. And so the United States is going to be presumably giving aid, reconstruction aid. We have to make sure that there are some restraints and constraints and demands attached to that to look out for these minorities. And we have to be conscious that they are not getting a fair deal from the local authorities or from their former neighbors. This is going to be a tough thing, and they may not be able to go back because it is so tough. In which case, then we have to provide for their future somehow, bring them here or distribute them around the West.
Now, back in 2004. Secretary of State Colin Powell determined that atrocities in Sudan's Darfur region constituted genocide.
Right, that's the only other time, yeah.
What became of that? How did that play out?
Well, I don't think that played out very well because I don't think there was, there was only a military possibility on the table, and nobody really wanted to send troops in there. But there are, things that can be done short of sending a military option. There can be, in the peace talks right now in Syria is a good example. Where is the Christian voice? They need to have that. They were 10% of the population. They deserve to be part of the country in the future. And the United States has to weigh in on this because nobody else is looking out for them. There will be, there are very few Yazidis in Syria. and the Shiites there will be protected by Iran, and the Alawites will be protected by Iran, but nobody is protecting the Christians in terms of looking out for their interests.
No nation state is considered their ally. Is that right?
That's right. Right. There's no Christian nation that's sticking up for the Christians in these peace talks, and they have no military, so they're not considered a problem. And so there's no incentive to pay any attention to them. All the attention goes to the squeaky wheel, the ones that are, with the bombs and with the military threat. So we need to really focus on these things.
Knights of Columbus, as you mentioned, you've been working with them, and they've been out front this petition drive. Do you know if they have any further plans?
We're talking today. I've been talking to them today about further plans, and so we'll let you know. All
right, good. We'll look forward to it.
Yeah, we're not spending time savoring our victory, but
I didn't think so.
We are trying to. It did take us by surprise, I must say.
Well, yeah. I mean, last week I don't think people were anticipating that Kerry would make this announcement. Yeah.
Yesterday, the State Department gave a press conference saying it wasn't going to happen today. They needed more time to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Nina, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Sure. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Nina Shea is director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. And she's been really one of the stalwarts in this battle for really this generation. For over 30 years, she's been pointing this out. I mean, this goes back. The problem, John Paul II also noted this, that around the world, Christians are more persecuted than ever before in our history. The Open Doors document that I referred to yesterday mentioned that persecution has doubled in 1 year. Persecution of Christians in particular have doubled. Now, there are other groups being persecuted. You mentioned the Yazidis, for instance, and certainly the Sunnis go after Shiite Muslims with great gusto. They regard them as heretics, and they go after them. But Christians are in the uncomfortable position of not having any Middle Eastern nation that will see them as their own. So, the Alawites are going to be protected, as Nina said, by Iran. And nobody does that for the Christians in the Middle East. The United States used to do it. Not anymore. I'm Al Kresta.